Hello and welcome to India Reads. We are reading the story of my experiments with truth by Gandhi. We've almost come halfway through the book and we are in a period where Gandhi is settled in Bombay. His son is unwell and is recommended a diet of non-vegetarian food, a stew of chicken and eggs, but Gandhi feels that that would not be the right decision for him considering the path that he'd chosen for himself and his family. His son agrees with him, and that's why we ended the chapter. Let's continue. This is part 3, section 23. To South Africa again. Manilal was restored to health, but I saw that the Girgaon house was not habitable. It was damp and ill-lighted. So, in consultation with Sri Reva Shankar Jagjeevan, I decided to hire some well-ventilated bungalow in a suburb of Bombay. I wandered about in Bandra and Santa Cruz. The slaughterhouse in Bandra prevented our choice falling there. Ghatkopar and places near it were too far from the sea. At last, we hit upon a fine bungalow in Santa Cruz, which we hired as being the best from the point of view of sanitation. I took a first class season ticket from Santa Cruz to Churchgate and remember having frequently felt a pride in being the only first class passenger in my compartment. Often I walked to Bandra in order to take the fast train from there to Churchgate. I prospered in my profession better than I had expected. My South African clients often entrusted me with some work, and it was enough to enable me to pay my way. I had not yet succeeded in securing any work in the High Court, but I attended the moot that used to be held in those days, though I never ventured to take part in it. I recall Jamait Ram Nanabhai taking a prominent part. Like other fresh barristers, I made a point of attending the hearing of cases in the High Court. More, I'm afraid, for enjoying the soporific breeze coming straight from the sea than for adding to my knowledge. I observed that I was not the only one to enjoy this pleasure. It seemed to be in the fashion and therefore nothing to be ashamed of. However, I began to make use of the High Court library and began and make fresh acquaintances, and I felt that before long I should secure work in the High Court. Thus, whilst on the one hand I began to feel somewhat at ease about my profession, on the other hand, Gokhale, whose eyes were always on me, had been busy making his own plans on my behalf. He peeped in at my chambers thrice or twice every week, often in company of friends whom he wanted to know, and kept me acquainted with his mode of work. Thus, but it may be said that God was never allowed any of my plans to stand. He has disposed them in his own way. Just when I seemed to be settling down as I had intended, I received an unexpected cable from South Africa. Chamberlain expected there. Here, please return immediately. I remembered my promise and cable to say that I should be ready to start the moment they put me in funds. They promptly responded. I gave up the chambers and started for South Africa. I had an idea that the work there would keep me engaged for at least a year, so I kept the bungalow and left my wife and children there. I believe that enterprising youths who could not find an opening in the country should emigrate to other lands. I therefore took with me 4 or 5 such youths, one of whom was Maganlal Gandhi. The Gandhis were and are a big family. I wanted to find out all those who wish to leave the trodden path and venture abroad. My father used to accommodate a number of them in some state service. I wanted them to be free from the spell. I neither could or would secure other service for them. I wanted them to be self-reliant. As my ideas advanced, I tried to persuade these youth again to conform their ideals to mine, and I had the greatest success in guiding Maganlal Gandhi, but about this later. The separation from wife and children, the breaking up of a settled establishment, and the going from a certain to uncertain, all this was for a moment painful, but I had inured myself to an uncertain life. I think it is wrong to expect certainties in this world. Where else but God that is truth that is where else but God that is truth is an uncertainty. All that appears and happens about and around us is uncertain, transient. But there is a supreme being hidden herein as a certainty, and one would be blessed if he could catch a glimpse of that certainty and hitch one's way into it. The quest for that truth is the summum bonum of life. I reached Durban not a day too soon. There was work waiting for me. The date for the deputation to wait on Mr. Chamberlain had been fixed. I had to draft the memorial to be submitted to him and accompany the deputation. With this, we've come to the end of part 3. Let's start with part 4. 1. loves labour laws. Mr. Chamberlain had come to get a gift of 35 million pounds from South Africa and to win the hearts of Englishmen and Boers. So he gave a cold shoulder to the Indian deputation. He said that the imperial government has little control over self-governing colonies. Your grievances seem to be genuine. I shall do what I can, but you must try your best to placate the Europeans if you wish to live in their midst. The reply cast a chill over the members of the deputation. I was also disappointed. It was an eye-opener for all of us, and I saw that we should start with our work de novo. I explained the situation to my colleagues. As a matter of fact, there was nothing wrong about Mr. Chamberlain's reply. It was well that he did not mince matters. He had brought home to us in a rather gentle way that the rule of might being right or the law of the sword. But sword we had none, we scarcely had the nerve and even the muscle to receive sword cuts. Mr. Chamberlain had given only a short time to the subcontinent. If Srinagar to Cape Comorin is 1900 miles, Durban to Cape Town is not less than 1100 miles. And Mr. Chamberlain had to cover the long distance at hurricane speed. From Natal, he hastened to Transvaal. I had to prepare the case for Indians there as well and submit it to him. But how was I to get to Pretoria? Our people there were not in a position to procure the necessary legal facilities for my getting them to them on time. The war had reduced the Transvaal to a howling wilderness. There were neither provisions nor clothing available. Empty or closed shops were there, waiting to be replenished or open. But that was a matter of time. Even refugees could not be allowed to return until the shops were ready with provisions. Every Transvaaler had therefore to obtain a permit. The European had no difficulty in getting one, but the Indian found it very hard. During the war, many officers and soldiers had come to South Africa from India and Ceylon, but it was considered to be the duty of the British authorities to provide for such of them as decided to settle there. They had in any event appoint new officers, and these experienced men came in handy. The quick ingenuity of some of them created a new department. It showed their resourcefulness. There was a special department for the Negroes. Why then should there not be one for the Asiatics? The argument seemed to be quite plausible. When I reached the Transvaal, the new department had already been opened and was gradually spreading its tentacles. The officers who issued permits to the returning refugees might issue them to all, but how could they do so in respect of the Asiatics without the intervention of the new department? And if the permits were to be issued on the recommendation of the new department, some of the responsibility and burden of the permit officers could thus be lessened. And that is how they argued. The fact, however, was the new department wanted some apology of work, and the men wanted money. If there had been no work, the department would have been unnecessary and would have been discontinued. So they found the work for themselves. The Indians had to apply to this department. A reply would be vouchsafed many days later. There were large numbers, and as there were large numbers wishing to return to Transvaal, there grew up an army of intermediaries or touts who, with the officers, looted the poor Indians to the tunes of thousands. I was told that no permit could be had without influence, and in some cases one had to pay up to £100 in spite of the influence one might bring to bear. Thus there seemed to be no way for me. I went to my old friend, the police superintendent of Durban, and said to him, "Please introduce me to the permit officer and help me to obtain a Transvaal. You know that I have been a resident of Transvaal." He immediately put on his hat, came out and secured me a permit. There was hardly an hour left before my train was to start. I kept my luggage ready. I thanked the superintendent Alexander and started for Pretoria. I now had a fair idea of the difficulties ahead. On reaching Pretoria, I drafted the memo. In Durban, I do not recollect the Indians having been asked to submit in advance the names of their representatives. But here there was a new department and it asked to do so. The Pretoria Indians had already come to know that the officers wanted to exclude me. But another chapter is necessary for this painful though amusing incident. Autocrats from Asia. The officers at the head of the new department were at loss to know how I had entered Transvaal. They inquired of the Indians who used to go to them, but they could say nothing definite. The officers only ventured a guess that I might have succeeded in entering without a permit on the strength of my old connection. If that was the case, I was liable to be arrested. It is a general practice on the termination of a big war to invest the government of the day with special powers. And that was the case in South Africa. The government had passed a peace preservation ordinance which provided that anyone entering the Transvaal without a permit would be liable to arrest and imprisonment. The question of arresting me under this provision was mooted, but no one could summon the courage enough to ask me to produce my permit. The officers had, of course, sent telegrams to Durban, and when they found that I had entered with a permit, they were disappointed. They were not in the men to be defeated by such disappointment. Though I had succeeded in entering the Transvaal, they could still successfully prevent me from waiting on Mr. Chamberlain. So the community was asked to submit the names of the representative who were to form the deputation. Color prejudice was, of course, in evidence everywhere in South Africa, but I was not prepared to find here the dirty and the underhand dealings among officials that I was familiar with in India. In South Africa, the public departments were maintained for the good of the people and were responsible for public opinion. Hence, officials in charge had a certain courtesy of manner and humility about them, and colored people also got the benefit of it more or less. With the coming of the officers from Asia came also its autocracy and the habits that the autocrats had imbibed there. In South Africa, there was a kind of responsible government or democracy, whereas the commodity imported from Asia was autocracy pure and simple. For the Asiatics had no responsible government, there being a foreign power governing them. In South Africa, the Europeans were settled immigrants. They had become South African citizens and had control over the department officers, but the autocrats from Asia now appeared on the scene, and the Indians, in consequence, found themselves between the devil and the deep sea. I had a fair taste of this autocracy. I was first summoned to see the chief of the department, an officer from Ceylon. Lest that I should appear to exaggerate when I say that I was summoned to see the chief, I shall make myself clear. No written order was sent to me. Indian leaders often had to visit the Asiatic officers. Among them was the late Sayyid Tayyib Haji Khan Muhammad. The chief of the officers asked him who I was and why I had come here. He's an advisor, said Tayyib said, and he had come here at our request. And then, what are we here for? Haven't we been appointed to protect you? What can Gandhi know of our conditions here? Asked the autocrat. Tayyib answered the charge as best as he could. Of course you are here. But Gandhi is our man. He knows our language and understands it. You are, after all, officials. The Sahib ordered Tayyib Said to fetch me before him. I went to the Sahib in the company of Tayyib Said and others. No seats were offered and we were kept standing. What brings you here? Said the Sahib addressing me. I have come here at the request of my fellow countrymen to help them with my advice. But don't you know that you have no right to come here? The permit you hold was given you by mistake. You cannot be regarded as a domicile Indian. You must go back. You shall not wait on Mr. Chamberlain. It is for the protection of the Indians that the Asiatic department has been specifically created. Well, you may go. With this, he bade me goodbye and gave me no opportunity for a reply. But he detained my companions. He gave them a sound scolding and advised them to send me away. They returned shunned. We were now confronted with an unexpected situation. Pocketed the insult. I smarted under the insult, but as I had pocketed many such in the past, I had become inured to them. I therefore decided to forget this latest one and take what course of a dispassionate view of the case might suggest. We had a letter from the chief of the Asiatic department to the effect that as I had seen Mr. Chamberlain in Durban, it had been found necessary to omit my name from the deputation which would wait on him. The letter was more than my co-workers could bear. They proposed to drop the idea of the deputation altogether. I pointed out to them that an awkward situation of the community. If you do not present your case below, Mr. Chamberlain, said I, it will be presumed that you have no case after all. After all, the representation has to be made in writing and we've got it ready. It does not matter in the least whether I read it or someone else reads it. Mr. Chamberlain is not going to argue the matter with us. I am afraid we must swallow this insult. I had scarcely finished speaking when Tayyib Said cried out, does not an insult to you amount an insult to the community? How can we forget that you are our representative? Too true, said I. But even the community will have to pocket insults like these. Have we any alternative? Come what may, why should we swallow a fresh insult? Nothing worse can happen to us. Have we many rights to lose? Asked Tayyib Said. It was a spirited reply, but what of avail was it? I was fully conscious of the limitations of the community. I pacified my friends and advised them to have in my place Mr. George Godfrey, an Indian barrister. So Mr. Godfrey led the deputation Mr. Chamberlain had referred in his reply to my exclusion. Rather than hear the same representative over and over again, is it not better to have somebody new? He had said, and he tried to heal the wound. But all this, far from ending the matter, only added to the work of the community and also to mine. We had to start afresh. It is at your insistence that the community helped us in the war, but you see the result now, where the words with which some people taunted me. But the taunt had no effect. I do not regret my advice, said I. I maintain that we did well in taking part in the war. In doing so, we simply did our duty. We may not look forward to any reward for our labors, but it is my firm conviction that all good action is bound to bear fruit in the end. Let us forget the past and think of the task before us, with which the rest agreed. I added, to tell you the truth, the work for which you had called me is practically finished, but I believe I ought not to leave the Transvaal so far as it is possible, even if you permit me to return home. Instead of carrying on my work from Natal, as before, I must do so from here. I must no longer think of returning to India within the year. I must get enrolled in the Transvaal Supreme Court. I have confidence enough to deal with this new development. If we do not do this, the community will be hounded out of the country. Besides being thoroughly robbed, every day it will have fresh insults heaped upon it. The facts that Miss Chamberlain refused to see me and the official insulted me are nothing before the humiliation of the whole community. It will become impossible to put up with the veritable dog's life that we shall be expected to lead. So I set the ball rolling, discussed things with the Indians in Pretoria and Johannesburg, and ultimately decided to set up office in Johannesburg. Just give me 1 minute. It was indeed doubtful whether I would be enrolled in the Transvaal Supreme Court, but the Law Society did not oppose my application, and the court allowed it. It was difficult for an Indian to secure rooms for office in suitable locality, but I had come in fairly close contact with Mr. Rich, who was then one of the merchants there. Through the good offices of a house agent known to him, I succeeded in securing suitable rooms for my office in the legal quarters of the city, and I started on my professional work. Quickened spirit of sacrifice. Before I narrate the struggle for which the Indian settlers' rights in the Transvaal and their dealings with the Asiatic Department, I must turn to some other aspects of my life. Up to now, there had been in me a mixed desire. The spirit of self-sacrifice was tempered by the desire to lay by something for the future. About the time that I took chambers in Bombay, an American insurance agent had come there, a man with a pleasing countenance and a sweet tongue. As though we were old friends, he discussed my future's welfare. All the men in your status in America have their lives insured. Should you also not insure yourself against the future? Life is uncertain. We in America regard it as a religious obligation to get insured. Can I not tempt you to take out a small policy? By this time, I had given a cold shoulder to all the agents I had met in South Africa and India, for I had not thought that life insurance implied fear and the want of faith in God. But now I succumbed to the temptation of the American agent. I proceeded with his argument. I had before my mind's eye a picture of my wife and children. Man, you have sold almost all the ornaments of your wife. I said to myself, if something were to happen to you, the burden of supporting her and the children would fall on your poor brother, who has so nobly filled the place of the father. How would that become you? With these and similar arguments, I persuaded myself to take out a policy for ₹10,000. But when my mode of life changed in South Africa, my outlook changed too. All these steps I took at the time of trial were taken in the name of God and for His service. I did not know how long I should have to stay in South Africa. I fear I might never be able to get back to India, so I decided to keep my wife and children with me and earn enough to support them. The plan made me deplore the life policy, and I felt ashamed of having been caught in the net of the insurance agent. If I said to myself, my brother is really in a position of my father, surely he would not consider it too much a burden to support my widow, if it came to that. And what reason had I to assume that death would claim me earlier than the others? After all, the real protector was neither I nor my brother, but the Almighty. In getting my life insured, I dropped my wife and children of their self reliance. Why should they not be expected to take care of themselves? What happened to the families of the numberless poor in the world? Why should I not count myself as one of them? The multitude of such thoughts passed through my mind, but I did not immediately act upon them. I recollect having paid at least one insurance premium in South Africa. Outward circumstances too supported this train of thought. During my first sojourn in South Africa, it was the Christian influence that kept me alive in the religious sense. Now it was the theosophical influence that had added strength to it. Mr. Rich was a theosophist and put me in touch with the society in Johannesburg. I never became a member as I had my differences, but I came into close contact with almost every theosophist. I had religious discussions with them every day. They used to be readings from theosophical books, and sometimes I had occasions to address their meetings. The chief thing about theosophy is to cultivate and promote the idea of brotherhood. We had a considerable discussion over it, and I criticized the members where their conduct did not appear to me to square with the ideal. The criticism was not without wholesome effect on me. It led to introspection. Result of introspection. When in 1893 I came in close contact with Christian friends, I was a mere novice. They tried hard to bring home to me and make me accept the message of Jesus, and I was a humble but respectful listener with an open mind. By that time, I had naturally studied Hinduism to the best of my ability and endeavored to understand others' religion. By 1903, the position was somewhat changed. Theosophist friends certainly intended to draw me into their society, but that was with a view of getting something from me as a Hindu. Theosophical literature is replete with Hindu influence, therefore, these friends expected that I should be helpful to them. I explained that my Sanskrit study was not much to speak of, and that I had not read the Hindu scriptures in the original. That even my acquaintance with the translations was of the slightest, but being believers in samskara, tendencies caused by previous birth and punarjanma rebirth, they assumed that I should be able to render at least some help. So I felt like Triton among the minnows. I started reading Swami Vivekananda's Raj Yoga with some of these friends and M.N. Dwivedi's Raj Yoga with some others. I had to read Patanjali's Yoga Sutras with one friend and Bhagavad Gita with quite a number. We formed a sort, sorry, we formed a sort of seekers club where we had regular meetings. I had already had the faith in the Gita, which had a fascination for me. Now I realized the necessity of diving deeper into it. I had one or two translations by means of which I tried to understand the original Sanskrit. I also decided to get by heart one or two verses every day. For this purpose, I employed the time of my morning ablutions. The operation took me 35 minutes, 15 minutes for the toothbrush, 20 for the bath. The first I used to do standing in Western fashion. On the second, so on the wall opposite, I stuck slips of paper which were written in Gita, which were written the Gita verses and referred to them now and then to help my memory. The time was found sufficient for memorizing the daily portion and recalling the verses learnt. I remember thus having committed to memory 13 chapters, but the memorization of Gita had to give way to other work and the creation and nurture of Satyagraha, which absorbed all my thinking time, as the later may be said to be doing even now. What effect this reading of the Gita had on my friends, only they can say, but to me the Gita became a fallible guide of conduct. It became my dictionary of daily reference. As I turned to the English dictionary for the meanings of English words that I did not understand, I turned to this dictionary for conduct for a ready solution uh, of all my problems and trials. Words like aparigraha, non-position, and sambhava, equability, grip me. How to cultivate and preserve that equability was the question. How was one to treat all alike insulting, insolent, and corrupt officers, co-workers of yesterday's, raising meaningless opposition, and men who had always been good to one? How was one to divest oneself of all positions? Was not the body enough itself position enough? Were not sorry. Were not wife and children possessions? Was I to destroy all cupboards of books I had? Was I to give up all I had and follow him? Straight came the answer. I could not follow him unless I gave up all I had. My study of English law came to my help. Snell's discussion on the maxims of equity came to my memory. I understood more clearly, in the light of Gita teaching, the implication of the word trustee. My regard for jurisprudence increased. I discovered in it religion. I understood the Gita teaching of non-possession to mean that those who desired salvation should act like the trustee. Those though having control over great possessions regard not an iota of them as their own. It became clear to me as daylight that non-possession and equability presuppose a change of heart, a change of attitude. I then wrote to Reva Shankar Bhai to allow the insurance policy to lapse and get whatever could be recovered, or else to regard the premiums already paid as loss. For I had become convinced that God, who created my wife and children as well as myself, would take care of them. To my brother, who had been a father to me, I wrote explaining that I had given him all that I had saved up till that moment, and but there that henceforth he should expect nothing from me, for future savings, if any, would be utilized for the benefit of the community. I could I could not easily make my brother understand this. In stern language, he explained to me my duty towards him. I should not, he said, aspire to be wiser than our father. I must support the family as he did. I pointed out to him that I was doing exactly what our father has done. The meaning of family had but to be slightly widened, and the wisdom of my step would become clear. My brother gave me up and practically stopped all communication. I was deeply distressed, but it would have been a greater distress to give up what I considered to be my duty, and I preferred the lesser. What that did not affect, but that did not affect my devotion to him, which remained as pure and great as ever. His great love for me was at the root of his misery. He did not much want my money as that I should be well behaved towards the family. Near the end of his life, however, he appreciated my viewpoint. When almost on his deathbed, he realized that my step had been right and wrote to me a most pathetic letter. He apologized to me, if indeed a father may apologize to his son. He commended his sons to my care, to be brought up as I thought fit, and expressed his impatience to meet me. He cabled that he would like to come to South Africa, and I cabled a reply that he could, but that was not to be, nor could his desire as regards his sons be fulfilled. He died before he could start for South Africa. His sons had been brought up in an old atmosphere and couldn't change their course of life. I could not draw to them. It was not their fault. Who can say thus far no further to the tide of his own nature? Who can erase the impressions with which one he is born? It is idle to expect one's children and wards to necessarily follow the same course of evolution as well. This instance to some extent serves to show what a terrible responsibility it is to be a parent. Okay, we're going to take a break right here. What do we have to unpack from this today's reading? Not much actually. Gandhi gets a call in Gandhi settled in Bombay. He's not enjoying his apartment in Girgaon. He decides to go for a slightly larger house. He chooses a bungalow in Santa Cruz, which is closer to the ocean, so that he can go for his walks there. As he does that, he's also doing well in his career. He's not making great progress in the High Court, but otherwise he's earning quite well. Now in Bombay, he also spends a lot of time in High Court like the others, but he admits to the readers that he goes there just to enjoy the breeze in the High Court rather than to learn the ropes of law. While he's doing all this, he gets a call from South Africa that Chamberlain is coming to South Africa and you need to rush. Now this is in line with the promise that he had made while leaving South Africa, that if he was required again, he would not mind coming. Chamberlain is from England, and he was coming there, and this was an opportunity for Gandhi to present all the cases all the issues that the Indians were facing in South Africa to him. A strong deputation was supposed to meet Chamberlain, and this so Gandhi first goes to Durban, and in Durban he is obviously there are a lot of people waiting for him, and there are a lot of issues also waiting for him. People want him to stay away. He realizes that Mr. Chamberlain, the best opportunity for him to meet Mr. Chamberlain would be in Transvaal, but transportation between provinces in South Africa for Indians and colored people were restricted, so Gandhi actually would not be able to enter Transvaal. But Gandhi actually realized that he was a resident of Transvaal earlier, and he used that as an opportunity to reach Transvaal. Once he spotted in Transvaal, people tried to get him arrested, but they could not do so because he had entered there with a legal permit. There's a lot of text after this. It's not too interesting, or it's nothing that you would miss so much. Uh, what else do I need to cover from this chapter? Uh, yes, so what Gandhi also does is he realizes that this period that he's going to spend in South Africa would go up to a year, and he decides to get his family also to South Africa. He starts looking for work, meaningful work in South Africa. He also gets in contact with his Christian friends in South Africa, who again are trying to convert him into Christianity. He, unlike earlier when he had come in 1890s, when he did not know much about his religion, now he knew a lot about his religion, and therefore was fairly comfortable and confident that the Hindu way of life was suited for him. And he kind of mixes with people who have an interest in Hindu philosophy, Hindu readings, Hindu theology. He interacts with a lot of theologists, as he had done in India with the Theosophical Society. He does that in England also, and he would try and to improve his knowledge of the Indian scriptures. He started reciting uh, one or two verses of original Sanskrit prayers on his own during his morning ablution. This was the perfect time for him, where he could focus on his prayers and could also do what he was doing, which was getting ready. However, he could not sustain this for a very long time, as he had also other issues and things that were pressing on him in his mind. He spends a little bit, few more pages on the Indian religious concepts, not just religious, but concepts which are written in the Gita, which talks about not possessing anything, and not having any kind of desire which will take you away from the path. uh, yeah. Now the last part of this reading, uh, he talks about responsibilities, and he realizes that if he has to focus completely on public service, he needs to stop supporting his family. So he writes a letter to his brother, which he does after a lot of hesitation, because his brother has been almost a father figure to him. He has supported him through thick and thin. He writes to him saying that he would not be able to in the future support his brother and his family. The brother was obviously upset with him and stopped all communication, but this kind of later got a little better. Gandhi also promised to take his brother's children with him, but he never did so, and his brother also passed away after some time. So this is where I would like to stop. This has not been a great chapter. There's nothing much that uh, has happened here. I don't think you'll miss much if you skip this chapter also. The main important crux of this is that Gandhi is back in South Africa. He's back in the facing the challenges that he used to do in the late 1890s. So let's conclude here, and we will catch each other soon for the next round of reading. Thank you. Bye.